Okay, we got another video for y'all tonight. It's about who did the Mizukage job the best out of all of the Mizukage. There's 6 of them. So I'll run it down for you. It ain't just how powerful they are now, y'all. How were they good at diplomacy? How, did a lot of ninjas die during their reign? Did they, run shit on their people to where they, killed their own people? Did they, you know, improve the village through, technological advancement and shit like that? All kind of things go into that. Not just, how powerful somebody is. That is something that, goes into it, but it's, more than that. So, the Mizukage that did the worst job, I give it to Gengetsu, the second Mizukage. Why? Because he becomes the second Mizukage, and this guy, right? He does the same thing that the second Tsuchikage does. They're like, we want to fight each other. We don't give a fuck about, or they didn't do that, but it's basically like they did that, right? It ain't like they were talking to each other on the phone or anything. They were, but they made a plan to fight one another. When they fought one another, and they basically caused problems for their people. If you're a Kazakage or a Mizukage, right? You don't want to, you know, do that. See, it wasn't one of those situations where one of them invaded, you know, each other's village. It ain't like Moose stepped into the, Mist village and said, "Hey, I'm here to, fuck shit up." It wasn't like that. It was like, he just wanted to fight somebody who was strong, and it was the second, Tsuchikage. So he was like, "All right, let me go see what he's looking like," and he didn't come back. And that leaves, a vacancy. When you could have just did other things. Like I have the next person, which is the third Mizukage. Now the third Mizukage, he was actually at the first Kage summit. He was there when the first Mizukage was making, moves with, or coming to, terms with what Hashirama was laying down. He was there during that, you know. But he became the third Mizukage after Gengetsu had died, right? So he wasn't more powerful, right? He wasn't more powerful than Gengetsu, right? Who had, Kekken Genkai, who was basically on par with Mu, who was the most powerful Tsuchikage of all time, right? This guy, the third Mizukage, I believe he was the one who started the Blood Mist Village, Blood Mist Village shit. He started implementing we need more quality over quantity. Now this is just or a quality over quantity type thing in shinobis. And then once Yagara got a hold of the position, you know, and he's at number 4 here, and he was the fourth Mizukage, right? See, the thing about Yagara was they wanted him to be the guy like Gara was for the Sand. He's a Jinchuriki, but we can make this shit work. This guy is powerful. He can protect us. We have a strong leader. They're gonna think twice before fucking with us. And it was kind of still like that, but at the same time, it wasn't, because guess what? They were killing off people, right? So basically what happened during Blood Mist Village, times, right? You gotta kill all the people in your class. You gotta kill all the, people in your class to advance, to become a ninja. Then when you become a chunin, you have to kill everybody in the chunin exams to become a chunin. If it's just happening in the Mist Village, right? And he was the one who was leaning into that shit hard, right? But remember, he was being manipulated by Obito. Had he not been manipulated by Obito, that village, he might have, done, better, but I have to put him at number 4 because he was doing shit like that. You know. Now at number 3, we got the first Mizukage. See, the first Mizukage, he has importance here because, even though he's a cracked out old man and stuff, there was no, there would be no like Mist Village had he not stepped forward and got all these people together and made the Mist Village a village. Because it was just it was the Warring States period for a while. They seen what was going on in Konoha area, and he was like, let's come together. The clans of like that area, and then they became the Hidden Mist Village. That he calls the fucking land of water, the like feudal lords of the land of water and shit. And they're the like, he's now the water shadow is essentially what the, Mizukage is. He went there and he understood that, to the first, summit, and he understood that the 6 tails and the 3 tails were his. Now I'm looking at this character, and you can judge him based off of looks, but it's the Mist Village too at the same time. So you gotta be like, okay, he looks faked out and other things, but but you gotta know that also, this guy's older, so he has experience too. He might just looking all like stupid and shit, so he can like throw off his enemies and shit. And he's actually, cool with like, hidden mystery. We don't know much about him, but we do know that he created like the village and he started that. So, without that, there's no Mizukages and other things. And what's this video about? Who did the Mizukage job the best? And he started all that. So, we have to give him credit for that. So that's why he's at number 3. Now at number 2 we have Chojuro. So no, Chojuro, he was, a boy who knew how to use one of the swords of the Hidden Mist Village, right? One of the legendary swords, right? And he was, a decent swordsman. He, participated in the Fourth Great War. He fought. He became the 6th Mizukage after Mei stepped down. He had good diplomatic relationships with the other villages. Now that kind of had something to do with the Fourth Great Ninja War, but it's like, still afterwards, people still are different and other things. It's not the same person. See, Mei was a female, he's a guy, and that's just simple things. This guy, uses a sword, Mei didn't, you know, things could go south, relations between nations could still, flip flop and get, crazy. Aliens started coming down. Basically, like, because Boruto happened and shit, right? And the aliens started coming down. He was still like had the sense to be like, okay, well, we can't handle this shit by ourselves. Naruto, is there any way we can, help you out, or you can help us out? And he's like, keeping good communication with them. We're gonna fucking fight these Atsuskis. We gotta make sure our village is all right. So he had that going for him. You know, and he could, and he wasn't gonna just sit back and not do anything. He's, still gonna, fight. He understood the position that he held and other things. And any of the other Mizukages before him would have, fought too. They wouldn't have just left it to another village, and he, tried doing shit like that. And he's at number 2. But number 1, I have to get to Mei, because Mei, all right, she came up, and it has nothing to do with that at all. It don't have anything to do with sex. She came into it, now it does a little bit. She understood that, okay, maybe we shouldn't be killing off our people like that. We're killing too many of our people off. The Blood Mist Village days are kind of like done now. We don't need to like kill our people off. You don't have to kill your fellow classmates to, move on in the tuning exams. Just defeat them in battle, and that's it. No, killing these people off for, whatever, right? But then it wasn't just that. She was able to, go to the 5 Kage Summit, put her concerns on the table. She was like, our 4th Mizukage, who was Yagara, he was there and then he was gone, when we were like scrambling, and then they just decided to make me the, fifth Mizukage. And she's like, she's trying to like gather information and shit. She's taking this matter seriously, right? And then once they, came to the agreement that, the Raikage would be the supreme commander, she wasn't, sideways. She decided, they decided that she was going to protect the feudal lord. She was doing that shit. And then when the time came, Madara's here. We need to come fight. She didn't, bat an eye. She was like, okay, send me to the battlefield. I want to fight Madara. You know, so she was doing her job. Now, was she the most powerful Mizukage? No, she wasn't. But she was, she cared about her people. Her people didn't die under her. Everybody was fighting in that war. Without that war happening and then them winning ultimately, but Naruto had to do some things. And come on now, y'all. Yeah, don't ride my dick about this shit. All right, we understand that she did what she had to do. She fought Madara with everything she had, just like all the other Kages. Madara is a legendary shinobi. He's built different. She wasn't gonna, win in a one-on-one. The fact that she, still went up against him and other things, that was cool. And then she also, and then this is another thing, she had the foresight to see that Chojuro was actually a better guy to like be the next, Mizukage than Ao. Al was still alive, y'all. Al was still kicking. He was still doing shit. And actually, come to find out that Al's a villain in Boruto. So guess what? She had good judgment, and she did. She's like, Chojuro, this young man is gonna do some shit. And he did. He became the sixth Mizukage. I give her fucking credit, boy. She's the best Mizukage at doing the fucking job. Ride my dick if you want to in the comments, but be cool, call in the corner, man. That's who, did the job the best. So who did the job the worst? It was Gengetsu, the second Mizukage, then the third Mizukage, then Yagara. He's at number 4. Number 3 is the first Mizukage. Number 2, Chojuro. He's the sixth Mizukage. And number 1 is Mei. And this is how well they did the job. Power is just one thing. How powerful their jutsus are and how, good they, beat people down. But are they diplomatic? Do they like, take, do they consider their people and shit when they're, doing things? Right? Do they like let their people die? Do they have, care about their population? Things like that. Do they like bring advancements, through technology, things, right? And that happened under Chojuro, by the way. You know, during like Boruto days and other things, he became the music guy. But I kind of didn't say that when I was talking about him. But that is the list of who did, the job the best for the Mizukages. I'm going to get the other Kages out in a minute.